Hello everyone, welcome back to my channel, and today I have some more art to share. My first video I did of Herb Oldie, and now I have another iconic pre-made that I'm going to be drawing today, and it is the one and only Miss Olive Specter. Very appropriate character for October, I think. The mourning widow of Strangetown, or at least that's what she wants you to think. So, fun fact, for this piece I used a saved sim version in Create-A-Sim of Olive, and I made a clone of her and put her into my test hood. I then like posed her and stuff and played with the lighting and everything to take photos, and that's what I've used for the references for this illustration. I'm probably putting them on the screen at some point right now. But this drawing actually gave me a bit of trouble. You may notice me redrawing her eyes quite a bit. Also the clone sim, I had realized after I took the pictures, the clone sim has eyebrows for some reason, but traditionally Olive does not have eyebrows. So I kind of had the added challenge afterwards of trying to sort of define her facial expressions and stuff using no eyebrows. Just trying to like make it look like she doesn't have them but is still expressive looking. Usually the eyebrows are like a very important part of drawing expressions, obviously, and stuff, so that was kind of interesting. But by the time I was done with the like the color and the shading and everything, I ended up actually taking like a week or two break from trying to work on the piece because I was not happy with how it was looking. Something wasn't right. And usually when I feel like that, it's definitely a good reason to sort of step away and stop looking at it, because when you look at it so long, it's like you can't truly see it very well anymore. You can't see it the right way anymore or something. And I'm glad that I did end up doing that, because when I came back to it, I felt like I was able to really see what I needed to fix, the various issues that were going on, and did tweak them. And so I do end up, even though in the sketching and lining process, I really liked the way her eyes were looking. In the end, they do end up looking quite a bit different. They're not quite as, I don't know, the style ends up being, the way I approached them was just a little bit different, but I ended up thinking overall it kind of worked better with everything that was going on in the picture. But anyway, what I was thinking was that it would be kind of fun to talk a little bit about the backstory of Olive for most of the remainder of the voiceover for this. I went ahead and wrote down a bunch of her history by looking at her Wikipedia page and some other information about her, as well as looking through her memories to tell like the order that things in her life have happened. To be able to talk about them from beginning to end. But I'm sure there's lots of other theories and things going on out there that feel free to share in the comments, or any other just theories and opinions and things. Like, I'm sure a lot of people know her well at this point, but some may still not, because there's like people who are really big Sims 2 fans, but they still prefer like Pleasant View or Veronaville over Strangetown, and they just don't really get into the gritty details of the mysterious Miss Olive Specter, other than just the general knowledge. So let's begin. Olive Specter was born Olive Moenda, daughter to Laredo Moenda and Pepani Moenda of Strangetown. She also has a sister named Willow, who would eventually marry Creon Nigmos, and they would eventually give birth to Ophelia Nigmos, who we are familiar with as a living sim also in Olive's household. In Olive's life, she would actually end up being engaged to marry 4 times, but actually only got married 3 times. Olive's first love was a sim named Earl E. Demise, and they met as teenagers, and then as adults, he would become her first fiancé. But for some reason, he ended up leaving her at the altar on their wedding day. Shortly after this, he would die from electrocution. I wonder why. And then according to her memories, she would go on to experience 8 more deaths. Whether she's responsible for these deaths or not is unclear. But some notable Sims of this group are her 2 parents, who died by fire, as well as a Tim Lee demise, who is the brother to her first love, Earl. But soon after, she would meet her love, Rigor Mortis. Rigor would become her first husband, but he soon would die by fire. After his passing, a couple more Sims would die, most notably Lila Grunt, the wife of General Buzz Grunt and mother to Rip, Tank, and Buck. And Lila ended up dying by electrocution. And her grave is on Olive's lot as well. All of these Sims that I'm mentioning that are dying are Sims that, for the most part, are on her lot. There's some that are in her memory that don't show up in her lot in the actual game. But for the most part, all of these Sims are in her garden, shall we say, the Olive Garden. But shortly after this, Olive would meet her next husband, Euthanasia. Shortly after marrying, another Sim named Luthanasia, which is Hugh's brother, would die. Then immediately after, Hugh would also die by fire. After these brothers passed away, Olive has, in her memories, one of the most interesting occurrences of probably her entire life, which is that she woohooed with the Grim Reaper. Right after this event, just as a side note, right after this event, the iconic NPC Knut Futa met an untimely end alongside another random townie that nobody cares about because obviously Knut is the priority here. Anyway, moving on. A few days later, Olive gave birth to a bouncing baby boy named Nervous. Tragically, however, Nervous would be taken away by a social worker shortly after. Unfortunately, Nervous would eventually end up in the custody of a pair of evil scientists named Circe and Loki Beaker. And one thing I'd like to note with that is, in my mind, I always thought of, for some reason, the name Nervous Subject made me think that Circe and Loki would have named him that. Now, obviously, the limitations of the game just show her having given birth to a baby named Nervous. So, but I feel like in my mind, I always thought of it like maybe Olive never even named him and just kind of handed him off, which is interesting because you'd think that she almost would want her Grim Reaper love child. But anyway, moving on. So next, Olive would meet and marry Ichabod Specter. Interestingly, he was the only partner of hers who would die naturally of old age. And a little while after Ichabod's death, Creon and Willow Nigmos would actually also die by drowning. And Ophelia, their daughter, would come to live in Olive's eerie home. The most notable feature, of course, of Olive's home is a graveyard, strikingly populated with lots of tombstones. And upon playing this household for the first time, Olive will be on her 10th day as an elder and on the verge of retiring from the slacker career. And I'm going to read Olive's actual biography. It says the following: Olive will stop at nothing to get what she wants. She spends her time collecting mushrooms, sharpening sticks, and excavating her yard. So yeah, that is pretty much the story of Olive, at least what we can tell from her, just kind of the way she is set up in the game with her memories and the Sims that are on her lot and all of this. And, of course, a big part of Sims lore is how it develops within the fan base over time. And at this point, it's like pretty much agreed upon, I think, for the most part, that Olive seems to be the only confirmed serial killer of the pre-mades. If I'm wrong, I'd love to know. Who else? Who else? But anyway, but what is interesting though is kind of looking at her motivation, assuming that she is in fact actively killing these Sims, which I feel like it's pretty obvious that she is. It's interesting to look at like her motivation for killing, because it seems that Olive does not murder for the sake of murdering. In fact, it's more that she murders for the sake of love. And what I mean by that is that you could say Olive has a thing for flirting with death, in the most literal way possible. She seems to have a lifelong obsession with building a relationship with the Grim Reaper himself, and could only manage to summon him via the death of other Sims. Now, obviously, we could think about it from, like, literal game mechanics. The only way you can get the Grim Reaper without cheats is to just keep murdering Sims and then trying to interact with him. Although I don't know in-game how much interaction you actually can do with him. It seems like he's always there for a short period of time, and then he kind of zooms off. I think there's been a couple times where he'll hang around. But, so obviously, from a mechanic, actual literal gameplay side of view, it makes sense that the people who were creating her, whoever was playing her back in the development studio, you know, they were killing Sims over and over and using it as part of a storyline. But it's interesting to think about it from like a different point of view, or more like like from a perspective that's not locked into the game mechanics, and you think like, how did that look from the Grim Reaper's point of view, or how did it look in general? Like, was the Grim Reaper at first like, man, this household has a lot of deaths, and this one chick is pretty talkative every time I come around here, like, or was it just like a love at first sight? Once she saw him and he saw her, but like maybe it was like he had a limitation. He can only visit the living world, like, when there's a death. It was beyond his control. There's some limitations to how often he can come and visit. So in turn, the true love they shared and the limitations of it pushed Olive to commit these murders. Is that it? I don't know. And then it kind of begs the question, like, is Olive really a bad person, or just been influenced by Death himself to do all these things? I don't know. I mean, I think she's still probably a bad person, but maybe after time she got a little bit more conditioned into the things that she was doing. I don't know. But the only other question I have is, like, the connection between Olive getting married to lots of men and then killing them. Like, she seemed to be doing pretty well with all the NPCs and the townies. Like, why do we need to keep marrying men? And I mean, it must have just been only for money. Of course, the developers set her up with being in the slacker career. Is that supposed to be kind of a nod to her not earning money herself and instead trying to marry into money? Actually, that being said, I just recalled that I think some of her memories showed that some of those Sims were rich. I don't remember which one it was, if it was Ichabod or like Rigor Mortis. She had like the memory of marrying a rich Sim after marrying them. So that's probably really what it is in the end, is that she was kind of doing her own little widow challenge, like from the people do it in The Sims 4 all the time now. Olive Specter invented that crap, kids. She invented that. But yeah, lots of interesting things to think about. And that's what, when we talk about the lore that's missing in some later iterations of the game. Even The Sims 3 really is missing a lot of lore compared to The Sims 2, you know? And, when we talk about that, that's what it really means, is to have a really interesting, in-depth character that then, piques your imagination and all of that. To finish off our little Olive-centric discussion here, I have some interesting facts about Olive that I found on the wiki page. When you scroll down towards the bottom of the Sims wiki page about her, there's a trivia section. They have it for a lot of like the Sims, and not everybody has a lot going on in there, but hers is quite extensive, but I picked out a couple of kind of interesting ones. So the first one's kind of interesting. Technically, Olive woohooed with the Grim Reaper after aging to Elder. And then, in turn, she would have given birth to Nervous as an Elder, which is technically impossible through the gameplay itself. So something kind of interesting to consider. Maybe that's just some magical Grim Reaper things. I don't know. There's a lot of speculation about Olive's name. Of course, a lot of the characters involved with Olive, like we look at Euthanasia and Rigor Mortis and such, all their names are like literal, like, words being turned into names. And a lot of people kind of speculate what Olive's name might be. I liked the one where they suggested that it is a play on the phrase, I love Specter, possibly leaning into her either loving the Grim Reaper or loving to see ghosts floating around that she has murdered. But another one that's kind of fun is back when there used to be an original Sims 2 website, they would have various news and things that would pop up just talking about the game and future packs and things like that. And they would often reference Olive Specter's cemetery, but they would call it Olive's Garden. Sometimes it is called Olive's Garden in-game as well, in certain descriptions and things. And many think it's probably a reference to the Olive Garden, which was thought to be a favorite restaurant for some of the game creators, or maybe just a popular web restaurant. Personally, I've heard some not fantastic things about Olive Garden not being that good. It's usually just kind of a joke to talk about going there, but I don't know how it would have been back then. One last little trivia fact, which I really thought was interesting, was that in The Sims 3, if you choose to paint a medium painting, there is a chance that it will come up, of course, just like in The Sims 2, there's always kind of random choices of paintings that the sim will end up actually creating. And in that game with a medium painting, there is a chance that it will be a picture of Olive being left at the altar by early demise, which the actual screenshot it uses is from some of Olive's like storytelling pictures, which is something that I'm really bad at looking at with the pre-made Sims. And I regret not having done it with some of them early on when I very first started playing them, was looking at those, because sometimes those early pictures are really interesting. Well, yeah, anyway, that's it for what I have to talk about with Miss Olive. I guess I can talk a little bit about the painting and where it's at right now. At this point, I had been experimenting with a lot of the type of shading I wanted to do, because I do really like doing more like hard shapes and stuff in shading, but also sometimes making it soft and making it kind of work. I went back and forth with a lot of different ways that I wanted to make the green lighting and the pink lighting work with her, because I had 2 lighting sources on her, one from either side. One was green and one was pink, and I wanted to introduce that into the actual painting because it made for kind of a nice effect, but it took a little bit of tweaking before I felt like it was working. And here we are introducing some of the pink in. I really like how I really like green and pink. It has to be the right shades of green and pink, of course, but I really like those two used together in this sort of way. I think it really added a nice pop as I was going with it. I tried to eventually sort of keep the pink less intense as the green. I do eventually go in and fix the green from how it is right here, just a little bit. I really liked how this little thought bubble turned out. In case you missed it earlier, I had typed RIP out in like a Simlish font and then traced it onto there. So I thought that worked a little bit better. Originally I had drawn like a little cartoon skull, but I decided to do something a little bit different. In retrospect, I might have also been fun to like put a picture of like the Grim Reaper with like some hearts around him to sort of match Miss Olive's little aesthetic. There we go, erasing them eyes again. And this is where I end up changing them to a little bit more exaggerated eye. And I think, like I said, I think it works a little bit better. I started using more of the like black heavy shading. Almost like, sometimes I like that, almost like a comic book style where they use like solid black in areas and stuff. And I was trying to kind of use that. Yeah, the eyes look a little goofy at first as I'm doing it. And then it kind of, like you gotta trust the process and eventually it gets there. And another, of course, I try to flip the image a lot. That's a really good tool for checking your proportions and how everything looks. Is to completely like horizontally flip the image. Sometimes if you have a traditional piece of artwork like an actual painting or a drawing, it's good to get up and like look at it in the mirror, like put it up in a mirror and see what it looks like. That can help you kind of recognize mistakes and things. So I do lots of flipping back and forth. And then last but not least, we have the wonderful white outline that I always have to do. It's an addiction. I can't help it. It's very fun to do. So that is that. Thank you so much for watching, and I hope you enjoyed this little deep dive into Miss Olive Specter. I'll be making some custom paintings with my pre-made art on them eventually. And I do actually have some that I've already made in the past that are of custom paintings featuring pre-made art that I've made. I do have those for download on my website. I can link those down below, or maybe even in like a pinned comment or something. I do plan on continuing these series. I have a little list of pre-mades that people have suggested in the past, but I always love to hear more suggestions or interesting characters to draw. And yeah, thank you very much for watching once again, and I'll see you next time. Bye.